Hey all. So, uh, I've had a fairly good day today, and I want to share a piece of advice that I've taken that has helped me tremendously. Whenever I say this, I do want to be cautious because uh, I'm not a communist, so it's a bit awkward that I am quoting a communist. But um, to quote Seneca, why should I consider this the property of Epicurus and not the property of all those who seek truth? The specific quote is by Slavoj Žizek. It's a Slovenian name, so I'm probably butchering it, but um, the advice goes that if you really want to change the world and you really want to improve it, the best thing that you can do is just say, I would prefer not to engage with this. I sound like such an armchair intellectual. I hate this. But what he's getting at is that instead of looking at the options that you have been given, instead of thinking in these terms that you have been given, instead just kind of have creativity with it. Be fluid with it. Like for instance, pretty recently, there's a bunch of trash in our yard, and that really bothered me because I'm a hippie. Not actually, but functionally I am, and uh, I remember thinking like, somebody's got to pick it up, but in my mind I had this idea that I didn't have the time, and that's just kind of a way that people think. That happens, a lot of like most people like do think like I have sufficient enough problems to not do X, Y, and Z. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. Most of the time it's not. I'm gonna be honest. And I remember at a certain point I just realized like I could just go out here and like pick up the trash. Like we have disposable gloves and we have a trash bag. So if I just spend like 30 minutes doing this, I might look a little weird, but the trash will be gone. And so I don't want to bring attention to myself. But thinking like that has helped me like a lot in my personal life. Like I've been a lot more productive. Uh, I've been able to avoid doing stuff that's unhealthy or doing stuff that's not very skillful. And it's a lot easier to have self control whenever I just remember that I can just say I would prefer not to. I would prefer not to uh you know go to a party and drink alcohol with a bunch of people that I hardly know around a campfire. Like I can just say I would prefer not to do that, and then I can just leave it there. Again, I do want to point out that or at least I want to kind of bring attention to an idea that I think is very useful, which is that earlier I quoted Seneca, and that specific quote that I was using, he was talking to uh, I think a Roman consul from like Italy, and he was talking to him and saying like he was quoting someone from an enemy school of philosophy, back during that day. You had the Stoics and you had the Epicureans. I could get into that, but I'm not going to. But they had a lot of very differing opinions, and eventually Lucilius, the guy he's talking to, ends up being like, dude, why are you quoting him? He's like, from an enemy camp, more or less. And so Seneca not only says that, but he also says, I'm quoting no, I think he says this later on. After that quote, later on, he eventually says, I quote Epicurus not as a deserter. I'm going to the enemy camp for reconnaissance, which is like a very mature thing to do, Um, even then, you still have the advice of, I would prefer not to coming into play then. You can just say like I would prefer not to engage with the conflict that me and these opposing people have. You even have this one gentleman. He's a great guy. I'd totally recommend looking him up. Whole video I've sounded so pretentious. I apologize. But there's this one gentleman. His name's Daryl Davis. And I look up to him a lot. And that's because I'm a wuss. I cannot fight for crap. But I do have the ability to speak. And a lot of what Daryl Davis did was the big thing that he did was that he was the first black guy to talk about his experiences with the Ku Klux Klan and them not be about, them persecuting him. His story was that he would, he had this very big curiosity of, why are people racist? And he ended up talking to the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, the CEO of racism, and he just kind of talked to him, just kind of listened to him, didn't agree with him, just told him that, pretty authentic with him. Just overall was a good guy to him. There's tension, obviously, but he eventually, became his friend. Not only did he become his friend, but this national leader of the Ku Klux Klan gives him his robe and says, "Hey, I quit. I'm not racist anymore." And that all has to do with just because Daryl Davis was willing to listen to him. And he would, in his mind, he would prefer not to engage with that racism. And I think it's definitely one thing to completely ignore the way the world works and to try and forge your own moral system to justify the way that you live now. That kind of gets into the idea of Nietzsche's idea of slave master morality, of how a lot of morality, a lot of at least Western morality is I kind of hate to say it, but it is kind of the justification of very plain living, kind of the living of common people, instead of looking at the greats and trying to emulate that in some way, shape, or form. I don't fully agree with that idea. I don't fully agree with the ideas of Nietzsche to begin with, but overall, I think there's a distinguishment between just making up crap to make your life more redeemable in your own eyes, and genuinely saying, being the master of your own destiny and saying, I would prefer not to engage with this. And so I think that one piece of advice, that one attitude change, is one that I feel like a lot of people could benefit from. I know it's one that I've really benefited from in the past maybe month or so. But yeah, that's one piece of advice that I wanted to give. I know I don't usually talk practically on here, which is something that I kind of regret doing. If you think that I'm right in thinking this, or you think I'm wrong in thinking this, if you think that I deserve to be hanged for heresy, please do tell me in the comments. I would love to talk to you. But yeah, that's my video today. All right, bye all.